Hello and welcome into another episode of Tigers Radio Podcast here at MotorCityBengals.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo, alongside me is Yooper. Chris will be along shortly, and we'll be talking a lot of the stuff that happened today in between the mini camp, what have you. But we'll get to that a little later. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, and iHeartMedia, and Stitchler. And we have a new Patreon, Tigers Radio, Tigers Minor League Report at Patreon.com. And we got a new subscriber, so thank you to, I'm not gonna say her name, but thank you, and just we're sending a little thank you package out there shortly. So our guest this evening is Phil Selig, who is responsible for a really good website called CubaDugout.com. He just took a trip to Cuba as the national series is kicked off and in league play, and he is a source for streaming games, and it's great because there's no baseball going on here. We're still a few weeks away from minor league spring training, and Phil just took a tour of the island where I probably wish us right now with the temperatures the way they are now that you were back there. Welcome in.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and thanks to modern technology. Unfortunately, I'm not in Havana currently, but my backdrop makes me think that I am. So I guess that's the closest that I can get to it. So
Yeah, and that's one of those things where kick things off. You're in a country where there's just history of baseball, and I know like for Tiger fans right now, we have normally we try to talk. I've been trying to open up the audience a little bit in terms of even talking about just different things that you can only talk so much about Detroit Tigers baseball before, and I have so many interesting. There's so many interesting things out there that I wanted to cover, and you just took a trip, and there, to me, one of the things I noticed was some of the photography. The video was well done, but
okay.
what made you start the website? What was the idea behind starting the website?
Yeah, so the website is actually relatively new, although I've been dabbling in the space for the past 10 years or so. The focus predominantly is more on the photo side. I'd say that's I like to think that's my greatest skill, but over time, my experiences and kind of what I've captured, and being a lifelong baseball fan and having pretty good idea sometimes of what's going on, has merged into more analysis and more writing. And so about a year ago, I launched the website after having mostly just a social media presence. And so fundamentally, just trying to grow the knowledge of the Cuban experience, the history. I've been very lucky that I've seen a number of players that are playing in the pros now before they left. Some successfully. I kind of looked and said that guy would probably have a successful career, and others I've been surprised by. But I've had some pretty unique experiences, captured some of it, and a number of different thoughts, and as many doors have opened and built a lot of relationships. I think has given me kind of a unique perspective, but one that I really like to share with baseball fans, all over the world.
Yeah, and the series usually starts a little later in August or September, I believe.
Yeah.
And this year it started in January due to COVID. So you did a really good article about how Cuba's handling baseball now with COVID. But going on, is it totally a fanless experience, or fans there with masks, or how's that whole process going?
So Cuba's gotten fairly back to normal. That was a level that was refreshing, and I definitely had some trepidations in before I took the trip, but a lot of those were assuaged fairly quickly. They're pretty serious about their masking, but the positive is that fans are allowed into the stadiums. It's supposed to be at a 50% capacity clip. I don't know how they actually monitor that, but so at least in Havana, the crowds were pretty robust, and what might have been lacking in attendance, so it wasn't at 100%. So I think they probably did cut some of that off, but what it was lacking in pure attendance was definitely made up for in exuberance, and so which had been lacking even before COVID. I guess one thing is there's still a lot of baseball passion, and the fans are very passionate in Cuba. But what they do have in common with fans all over the world is if you don't give them a good product, it's harder. It's a harder sell. And so that passion exists. But it's good to see that it was revived. And specifically, I was at the home opener for Industriales of Havana, who are often considered the Yankees of Havana. And after 2 long years, there was a lot of pent up demand and pent up aggression, and it was great to see fans back in the stands and excited and exuberant.
And I gotta say, the article about comparing the apples to naranjas was good because when you got to the Tigers portion, you didn't really go make it softball and go, well, hey, the Tigers are no, you did a good comparison to the Giants, and maybe it's kind of like if you get a chance to look at it here, we'll put the article in the description of the podcast this evening. But yeah, the Industrials are the biggest team and one of the most popular teams, and actually I like the simplicity of the logo and um, even the jerseys. But as far as contending this year, is it too early to tell who's going to rise to the top here?
Yeah, so the league itself is in quite a bit of transition. I mean, the news that makes the rounds for good reason has been the number of top level and younger players that have left. So some figures peg that about 20% of the league is going to be rookies this year. That being said, I mean there are some jurisdictions are going to have greater advantages. I guess the easiest way that I can say it, I'm predicting that Matanzas is a team that they lost in the finals last year, but probably has the best chance to win it this year because they are returning a lot of veteran players, and they're kind of unique too that they've repatriated some players that actually had a cup of tea in either in the majors or in major league camps. So they've done a good job of building a roster that way specifically for the National Series, where a lot of other teams, are developing players, hoping they'll stay. Sometimes that's a little naive, and it's had an impact on different teams. But so far through the first 15 games, I would say there aren't too many surprises, except that it's very bunched up. So no team is eliminated just yet. But also the other thing that you see happening a lot of times with the National Series is now this year could be a little bit different too, because as you mentioned, that the timings are a bit off. That normally would start in September, in August or September, and it's been pushed back effectively to a lot of times when the championship series would be held. So a lot of times, what will happen towards the end of a season is if players are returning. There are players that are allowed to play in Japan. There are players that are allowed to play in Mexico. So a lot of times, if those players come back in time for the playoffs, can have a big impact. One small thing that I think a lot of purists that like the game on the island are enjoying to see is I think they've eliminated. They used to have for a few years they would have a reinforcement draft kind of entering. So at the midway mark, half the teams would stop playing, and some players would be redistributed. Then they do that again entering the playoffs. So at least last year, as disjointed as it was for the 75 games that they got in the playoffs, felt like the first time in a long time when the team that won it was of players from that province and the team that was closest to the one that started at the beginning of the year.
So one of the other questions I want to ask you too, in terms of like Cuban baseball history, you look at
Mhm.
almost you view it in two chapters, or at least from my perspective, two chapters. Everything before 1961. So as
Mhm.
far as historical records are concerned, with finding, because this kind of ties in with the Negro leagues and trying to put the history together. Where, for example, there's one article, or there was a website that had Minnie Minoso, the Hall of Famer for the White Sox. He apparently played for the Los Tigres multiple times throughout, but then you go to Baseball Reference and it shows they only played for one off season in 19, I think it was like 1957. So how hard is it to find truth versus fiction?
Yeah, no, it's getting easier, and I do have to give credit to some of the trailblazers that have been out in that space. And there are some great books, and I try and reference them anytime that I pull from that material. The people who've paved some of that road for me. So the late Peter Bjarkman was a trailblazer. Cesar Brioso also has put out some good books, and through Saber and through and through Baseball Reference, it's getting easier. Oftentimes it does, if I've been at it long enough, I think that if I read something and my instincts are pretty good when it needs a little bit of follow up to kind of piece together some of that, doesn't mean I get it 100% right, but have been getting better at that. And sometimes it can be very confusing, or it can be similar, or there's small little quirks that aren't completely covered. As you mentioned, there's a great history with the Negro leagues, and make no mistake about it, Cuba was definitely a little bit more progressive. But I've tried to trace out a little bit more of that history history and how some of those relationships came together and how some of the great Negro League players ended up in Cuba and vice versa. And, it's a different era. So, it's not as if someone just, oh my God, these guys are so fantastic, we need them here. It's more that the relationships were forged kind of in the States. An opportunity came up because the original Cuban Pro League that used to run in the winter was typically anywhere from 2 to 5 teams. Almendares and La Habana are considered the immortal rivals, but fundamentally they were always struggling to find a consistent third or fourth team. And really it was because everything was Havana centric. It hadn't spawned out into the other provinces. So a lot of times teams would start playing, run out of money, couldn't draw the fans. So just a quick anecdote on that is, and I put out a video recently on the 1923-1924 Santa Clara Leopardos, who are a legendary team and considered kind of the best Cuban baseball team ever, and we're backstopped by a number of Negro League stars such as Oscar Charleston. But I think I've learned over time, and again, thanks to the writings of some of those that have blazed that trail before, that you begin to find out that some of the lore, now not what they did on the field, they were impressive, make no mistake about it, but just some of the lore that, did the other teams tap out? More likely it was that it just wasn't financially viable to keep traveling to that, so they kind of ended the season early. So there's a lot of that early on, but there was always that will to try, and that's why you would see players come and go and have to, maybe play for a little bit. And it wasn't that they couldn't hack it. It's probably that the paychecks stopped coming. So then did they move to Mexico? Did they move to the States? It was always kind of patchwork together that way. So it's interesting to see that tapestry. But again, some of the names and some of the luminaries that plied their craft there. If I had a time machine, I wish I could go back with my camera, both for stills and for video. So.
Yeah, the looking at some of the winter leagues, and imagine him playing the same 4 teams. So you're looking at a team playing, 3 other teams.
Yeah.
137 games. So that, or just imagine it. I don't know, like that would be kind of like, all right, well, here we go again, playing the Elefantes, and but
so
get
the seasons typically were a little bit shorter, but sometimes it could definitely turn into that drain. And again, it was kind of funny that the whole league was basically owned by a chap named by the last name of Linares, and was always struggling to try and prop up and find that viable squad. And then in the 1940s is when you started to see what kind of is considered what most people consider that true footprint of the league. When you had Almendares, you had Habana, you had Cienfuegos, and you had Marianao. And then ironically, at different points, all of them would be playing out of Havana. And so again, it was always trying to find that financial viability and find a fan base with a vision of eventually getting kind of every province, and those provinces, the jurisdictions have grown, but for every province to have a team as they do now. So I guess if I want to be completely accurate, there are 15 provinces and 1 special jurisdiction, which is La Isla de Juventud, but 16 teams, effectively meaning that the major city in every one of the provinces in Cuba is represented by a team in the Cuban National Series.
So in terms of looking at some of that, getting into Cuban baseball and into Major League Baseball now, in terms of into the 90s a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Some of the Trailblazers I think of, course, Levan Hernandez, and then another arm that another person I really consider even for pitching wise is Rene Ochoa, who was a great national player. Talk about were these some of the players, including was it Rolando Rojo from the Rays, right?
Rolando Rojo, yep.
Yeah, are those in terms of from the island perspective, are those some of the Trailblazers that really set the foot for into the modern game a little bit?
So you see, there's a few different epochs or eras for that, and so nobody's path on the island is the same. And so I mean, to pull it into Tigers terms, obviously Barbaro Garby was kind of the first sort of person to make that jump post revolution. So there was a big gap in there. And even his case, I've studied it a little bit. He was kind of banned from the National Series over potentially betting on games. So I think he was actually allowed to leave during the Mariel boat lift, which is, the famous scene at the beginning of Scarface. And so, maybe they considered him a ne'er-do-well and were like, yeah, best of luck. But he turned it into a World Series ring in a short career. So then there was a little bit of a gap in between there. And outside of the fact that obviously we've got some other great players that we don't always think of as being Cuban, in your Jose Canseco's and Rafael Palmeiro, but obviously got out very young. So that we had a few examples of that. But you're right. In the 1990s, we saw a little bit of a shift, and actually at first it was largely pitchers. So it's a lot of guys that were with the national team, and some of the stories are well documented, and obviously a lot of it was under either the cloak of darkness or with a couple of the players I think escaped during either Olympic tournament or a qualifying tournament. So that it's never easy. It's never an easy decision for anybody that's choosing to leave. But for those first group, we look and say they were definitely risking a number. Risking not seeing their family, but they're risking their own health and their methods of getting out. So, we saw that wave of pitchers, and then again there was a little bit of a break, and then the big shift really was, I think, the World Baseball Classic in 2006. Because it was kind of the first time that we saw this vaunted team, and Cuba had dominated in international competitions, the Olympics, all of that. But there was always a bit of a perception that they were effectively a professional team playing against amateurs. Debate that, if you will. I mean, there's a heck of a lot of talent and a lot of guys there that if the majors could have gotten a hold of them, there's some famous stories about Omar Linares being courted by the Yankees, and they basically offered him a blank check, but either he didn't want to leave or was unable to leave. So there's a level of that. But really, 2006 is when we start to see that pivot, and I think some of it might have been more players, once they saw that they could compete against those the U.S. and the Dominican. They finished second in that World Baseball Classic, only to Japan, but really looked and said, hey, we can do this. And then kind of some agents and some human smugglers got involved in there, and then when the dollars had started kicking around, really tipped off that next step. So that takes us today, where a lot of times people can use different methods. Thankfully, I think it's safer. There's the talk that most of the human smuggling element has been eliminated, so it does seem to be a safer path out. But make no mistake about it, these guys are still risking. They're risking the chance that they might not be able to see their family, for at least 8 years is some of the policy, to beyond that, to you are still potentially dealing with some shady characters. Some people are being sold a bill of goods over whether someone can get them there. So and just the inherent risk of how do you pay your bills, as great as it looks when the guys sign for the dollars, that's no easy path even to get to that point. So there's a lot of inherent risk in there, and maybe someday that path will be a little bit more legal. We keep our fingers crossed. 2018, obviously there was talk of a deal, but I'm cautiously optimistic, but sometimes myopic on that maybe that deal can be revisited.
Yeah, I hope so too, because you look at a team, for example, I think of the 91 Estrada's that had 3 or 4, or potentially, I think it was 4 players who eventually would hit the major leagues at some point in the minors in certain cases. Ray Ordonez, which was one shortstop for the Mets, one of the first players I remember wearing number 0, talented defender. Hitting wise, he was a little light hitter, but still, he was a great defender.
He was a wizard, yeah.
He was definitely a wizard. And then, Yuki Rojas, who is now the Tigers Latin Player Development, was the all-time leader in saves for the national team, is part of that team. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier with Renee. So to see a team like that finish, in terms of just the amount of talent on that one team, to end up kind of paving the way for others to come in there, that's where I think it's. And I'm glad to see that, if it's going to be more humane. And it seems like we hear these stories, and a lot of people think it's exaggeration. It's not. And I firmly believe that when you hear people going on, like the people going on the boats and what have you, it's painful. It really is.
It's heart-wrenching. Like I said, thankfully, it seems like most of that has been eliminated, or at the very least, when players have taken the opportunities more kind of when they're traveling. make no mistake about it. That's a serious threat to the federation, and they're currently kicking around different strategies. That's why I don't think you're going to see them in as many tournaments, and it might even impact the teams that they send. So I always say, I try and strike a balance in my coverage. Also, in terms of, I mean, I like to see a thriving Cuban league, but by the same token, I want to see every player get the chance to, if there's a higher league that they can play in, that they can make that money and really alter their life. I want to see everybody get the chance to do that. So it's trying to find that balance. But there are people, I'd say, that are getting paid more than me, but it is Cuba, so maybe they're not. But there are people that are in more important positions than I am that are making some of those decisions. So,
the White Sox have seemed to have always had that little bit of a pipeline going back to Alexi Ramirez and so on. And now obviously with Luis Robert. Can you talk at all about some of the relationship building that they must have established to get that small pipeline of players, and what other teams aren't doing?
Yeah, so I think there is a level of, it started with a level of faith in their scouting department, and so because people frequently ask, are there scouts on the island? As far as I know, the answer is no, and kind of the answer driven is into the ground is no. So the reality is that with a lot of these players, the first look is going to be, once they've gotten out and once they've gotten into the Dominican. And so even if you look at it as a philosophy, how more recently, I guess, because you think about it, it's in the past 5 years is when things have really changed with the international spending limits. And so it's still early, but we haven't seen too many kids that have really broken through that yet. So if you look at that previous model of, and I think Luis Robert is probably the last one that we're going to see that kind of came over as a true free agent before that change. But Robert and Abreu, and like you say, Alexi Ramirez and the like, was more of that leap of faith that they knew that they were getting kind of a veteran player. But there was still inherent risk, especially when you look at the same time that, other teams, the Red Sox kind of swung and missed on a couple. Rusney Castillo stands out. The Dodgers spent big money. So I think there is a level that the White Sox, gambled on the right players. And from there, everybody that comes over looks and says, Jose Abreu has been a steadying professional presence in that. But they have a strong history as well, going as far back as Minnie Minocio and the like. And so I think that's that pipeline that they've built. The Astros have a strong one as well. Sometimes I think some of it's overstated. Like it's just if you sign the right players, and so because a lot of people reach out to me and like, oh, I cheer for Team X. I wish they would sign more Cubans. I'm like, well, sometimes be careful what you ask for on that. Depending on what the organization's philosophy is, because it looks good when on that major league level when you see Moncada, even though obviously he was signed by the Red Sox, and Abreu and Luis Robert, but I'm not sold that that's necessarily the player that's coming over just yet, or that path is going to be the same moving forward. So as an organization, when people say, why do some teams, spend more time in the Dominican or spend more time in Venezuela, I think a lot of it has to do with trusting their scouts. Some of it's the process, and some of it's just philosophy of the type of player, the age of player, and how much they want to put into their development. And so, you can catch lightning in a bottle, or you can turn around very quickly. Obviously, the White Sox have, in the past couple signing periods, spent big on a few more mature players, but their window is going to be shorter. That if they're not making an impact soon, they're going to look at it and say, do we wish that we had signed a 16 or 17-year-old? So there's always an opportunity cost in any signing, especially with prospects.
What is the youth development program in Cuba look like? I mean, how soon are some of these top players identified there?
Yeah, so they have a few different tiers. Basically, I believe there's a U12, a U15, a U18, and U23 program. So depending on what province it is. Now, I've seen some of this firsthand. The rest of it I've kind of stitched together, and sometimes you can't get the full answer, or the answer is that it's some of it's regimented, but it's not completely. But for instance, I've spent some time in Cienfuegos, and they have academies there.
Okay.
So I think some of the smaller provinces use more of an academy-based system, where if the kids get identified in Little League and, kind of apply for that program, spend, basically their full days doing different sessions of baseball, some general athletic training, and their scholastic work. However, recently just spent some time with a young pitcher in Havana, and kind of asked what his process was, because his path was a little bit different, and I think this mirrors what I've heard from a few other people too, that in the bigger city there is a development path, make no mistake about it. They have their eyes on some of the top players, but if you kind of find your way into working into, not completely affiliated, not Little League like we would necessarily think about it in the States, but he said he started showing up to his local ball field at 9 years old, and so it's a nice facility by standards. So to just call it's not like it's this is an inner city ballpark that has some infrastructure, but basically the chap who was overseeing this program used to be with Industrialis. So, he's keeping his eyes peeled if he sees top level talent to either work with the kid or get that messaging out to if he knows someone on the squad, hey, take a look at this guy if they've missed to that point. So actually I was watching today, I was seeing some interesting that after I was watching a Matanzas broadcast, that they were showing that right after the provincial league was playing, and I have seen the provincial league in the past. So there is pipeline that way. They do keep touch. It's not quite minor league, but a lot of times if kids are scouted early, they'll get into the pipeline, but there are still other opportunities to be seen and to kind of force your hand and to make them take a look at you.
I got to believe it's just amazingly competitive to get a spot in an academy.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know all the details on that, but I assume there's an application process, and especially because I think it's heavily subsidized if it's not paid for completely. So they're not going to waste a spot on that, and so it's I hate to, like, there does seem to be some sentiment that they are losing a lot of athletes to either soccer, not that they're playing at that high a level, but if the kids aren't getting identified earlier, I think kids are getting a little bit dissuaded from it, and then just playing other sports for fun. Whereas there's almost a little bit more of a perception now that it is an elitist thing. Whereas even if it was true or if it wasn't, that everybody's just playing on sand lots and everybody has a chance. I mean, you do have to have a development program, but I think we've seen. Or the way I'll phrase it is there's definitely pressures on the game overall. Some of it's cultural, on TV, you see more international soccer. Kids are wearing those jerseys. They're becoming fans of that. You're losing kids to the cell phone and to the screen. So in a lot of ways, it's similar to the States and to the rest of the world, that if you take those kids, you take that fan, you take them for granted, there's a greater chance now than ever that you're going to lose them.
Yeah, I was going to ask in terms of from a competition standpoint, the equivalency. For example, we can say the Mexican League is, I think, the equivalency of, I believe, Double A for the national series. What kind of level of baseball for fans checking out the podcast would you compare it to?
So it's tough because I've heard A-ball, and so make no mistake about it, it really depends on the matchup that you're seeing, because the way that I look at it is, so the Mexican League obviously is a professional league. They pay, and I don't want to discredit because there's a lot of good ball players there, but it's almost either guys that are just destined to play there or flamed out elsewhere. Whereas historically, at least, the national series, just because the structure obviously has produced more people that have graduated on to the major leagues. So if the overall talent level is probably more consistent, to say that Double A level in Mexico, is the Cuban League more an A ball, maybe to that Double A, but obviously you can run into that more of those diamonds, kind of in the rough that you look at and say, oh, this guy could be in the show someday. The caveat on that is the way that the talent has kind of gone in the last little bit, that I think you're going to see fewer and fewer players actually have a sustained career in the national series. I hope that isn't the case. And again, that kind of loops back to the plan that was in place back in 2018 that would have been more similar to a Japanese posting system, where if a kid is, has played 6 years or, 7 years of service time and reaches 25, then could be posted. So, I mean, that way you could have the best of many worlds, that can still play for Team Cuba, still that your teams in Cuba aren't losing their best talent, and in fact actually probably creates a better pipeline, that you're not losing as many people that are just leaving on a lark, as opposed to theoretically every guy that's going over is because he's considered a bona fide prospect, and then the scouting comes into place a little bit more. So, it's the way I liken it is, I mean, I'm not going to get too deep into the politics. We know how messy they are, and everybody's got a hand in that. But, there is some level that I think Major League Baseball is the one who has shied away from reviving the deal, even though, it was struck down over kind of legal grounds. But I think MLB now is less likely to revive that, because they're getting the best of all worlds. So they can still get the players. They're paying them less and less, but the only fear I have of that is you could be penny wise and pound foolish. And just like any resource, if you don't if you don't cultivate that soil, eventually the crop is going to stop growing. So
the one of the last things I want to ask you, in terms of, you're talking about the infrastructure right now for like Little League Baseball, or setting up with competing with soccer, or even like traditional, what people consider powerhouses for Cubans, such as judo or taekwondo, boxing was of mine, volleyball. The female team has done really well throughout in national competition. So in terms of that, even for the way you were mentioning earlier about the people more have cell phones now more than ever on the island, and cell phone service is getting better. But as far as from a national presence, it still seems like baseball, in terms of on a world stage, that Cuba still ranks among the top 5 countries in the world.
So depending on which ranking, so via WBSC, I think they recently moved up to 9th from 11th, because I mean there's been it's been a while since they've had that impact, and you can debate what the cause of that is. I mean, the reality is there's more Cuban baseball talent in the world than there's ever been. Most of it is just not in Cuba anymore. So those drains are real. And again, the passion is still there. It's just, they are moving into a more digital world, and a small thing that people frequently lament, or one of the things that actually brought excitement, I should say, while I was there. So the background is one of the series that I got to, and those were day games. Now we found out the next day that the next coming games would be during the night. That doesn't sound like it should be a big thing, but with the energy concerns that they've had over the past couple of years, many of the stadiums, their lighting systems have fallen into a state of disrepair. So historically, where there would be during the season a primetime night game on TV every night, that wasn't the case. Luckily, that's starting to revive a little bit. So in its place, though, is not broadcasts of Major League Baseball. It's international soccer on the on the state broadcaster. So there's a level of that's created a lot of that demand. I mean, personally, it's a little bit disappointing sometimes when I'll walk into a bar or into the hotel lobby and ask to turn on baseball and find out I'm the only person who wants to watch it. So there are strains, but that being said, like I said, there is still a hardcore fan base. There is again more baseball talent being developed there, but it's oftentimes for other markets, and so there's some serious issues at play. They're trying to be progressive in many regards. I think that they recognize there's a problem, but then sometimes it's one step forward, 2 steps back. Again, I watch it from a couple different perspectives. First and foremost, I want to see the league and the culture thrive, but also for everybody to get their chance to play at the highest level that they can. So it's interesting to watch, but there are a lot of changes, but even as such, it's worth watching, I think. So
definitely. And so for anybody out there who want to subscribe to his YouTube channel, one of the things that I did not know about, and it was in your video about the greatest team ever, was that there was actually segregation in Cuban baseball. And that's something that it might come to a shock, but for anybody that's dealt with, for personal experience for myself, and hear my father talking about some of these stories that he dealt with growing up, it kind of makes sense in some ways. And so that's another, again, that's getting political. That's another story for another day. But I honestly, if you want to go to his YouTube channel, Cuban Dugout, and of course, go to his website, cubandugout.com, some great stories. And again, I just wanted to educate some of our Tiger fans a little bit about, again, there's just a lot of negativity, which Chris and I and Yooper will get here in a second. But honestly, Phil, you're doing a great job. You're doing some great work and telling these stories, and it needs to be, whatever happens to the series itself, as it evolves with other sports and what have you. I still think there's such a value to having the Cuban history told, because it's really one of the oldest in terms of how long it's been around. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, so without getting too deep into it, you're right. There's obviously a rich history that goes back to just 2 years after the launch of the National League and so in 1876, I think, was kind of the first organized professional league in Cuba. So there is a rich history there. It's long and winding, and is tied into some big elements and big moments in history overall. But even to today, is still a great culture that welcomes foreigners by and large. And if people do have the opportunity to either visit and see it, or visit and see it through my eyes, what I, and the work I'm trying to do, I hope that they enjoy that. And if anybody wants to follow along, all of my hashtags all of my handles are Cuba Dugout, cubadugout.com, against multiple multimedia, through writing, through photo, through video. Maybe it's multitasking, and anytime they say you're multitasking, you're probably doing it all poorly, but hopefully people follow along and enjoy. And so, yeah, thank you.
No problem. We'll put the links in our podcast description tonight. So, Phil, we'll hopefully talk to you again soon. Thanks again.
Right. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks
Phil.
Yeah. So,
thanks, Phil.
Yeah, there's some good history lessons to everybody out there listening. And so I just wanted to, I just wanted to have something a little different for the podcast. I really did. And it was nice to have Phil on. And in terms of just getting elaborate with the history, it definitely, to me and to anybody out there as a baseball fan, I know this is maybe sound like but Chris and I and Yooper, I know you're a historian of baseball too. So to have this on is a little different. So how about you? I mean,
that was great. I mean, he's on the deep end of the pool. I mean, he's very knowledgeable. That was very interesting to listen to. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I feel bad that I wasn't participating at all, but I know next to nothing about Cuban baseball. Like, I was one of those people who believed the rumor for the years that Castro tried out for major league teams or whatever, which ended up not being true. But I did think there were rumors about him kind of stacking his favorite team. I don't know which team that was, but no, I mean, it's fascinating. And one of the things to think about Cuba, you mentioned it, Rogelio, that like there was segregation in Cuba before, in baseball. It doesn't seem all that surprising to me, because Cuba was kind of like a colony of the United States there in the early 1900s, wasn't it? I mean, it was basically a place where people went on vacation to gamble and visit prostitutes. And like, it was the history of America is one of exploitation. And so it was basically, like.
What was that, Yooper? I'm sorry.
It was kind of the Las Vegas of its time, really.
Yeah. And also too, yep, that's right. We're Vango wanted that. Yeah, Cuban Dugout. So thanks for checking it out. We're Vango. We appreciate you listening to us live on YouTube. And it was also because of and from my little bit of history, I know that for a fact that had to do with if you're a Spanish landowner in Cuba, and then it was kind of basically you're a darker color skin. If you're considered black or brown, you pretty much were hosed. There's no other way to say it. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's one of those things where I don't know. You have a picture of what Cubans look like in your mind these days. At least I do, and they look. What's that? Huh?
Oh, I was saying.
No, I just But you realize it like anything else in the Western Hemisphere, it was basically, colonized and by white Europeans who either then killed a bunch of people or slept with them with or against their will and produced this kind of hybrid. And so there's a lot of the ills that we saw in America for many years and maybe still see to now were there. And who was it? Batista, the head of the government before Castro, was basically a puppet, right, of the U.S. and it was characterized by just tons of corruption. It's so.
My dad worked for Batista. I showed
you
you a picture of him. Remember, I showed you guys. I don't know if I showed you a picture of my dad. I'll find it right now while we're on recording.
But
so watch it out there. But
I like that Phil was like, I don't want to get political, and then I just jump in and go, look at all this terrible political stuff.
No, and there's the thing about during that period of time for Cuba, during the Batista period, there's so many, like, my dad really didn't talk about it too much. It was one of those things, like, he just, again, like, finding pictures of his stuff after he passed away of him racing motorcycles and winning all these titles and everything, never ever talked about it. And I kind of understand why now, because it's perhaps to me, it's, well, to our family interpretation, really, it's just kind of brutal. It's kind of hearing that, like you spent all your life being raised there, you have all your friends, everything, all of a sudden can't go back there and you can't relive the memories and what have you. And so that's something I didn't really think of before, because every time we mention it, it's like, don't worry about it, and like stuff like that. And you just say, no te preocupa, and like, just, he wouldn't want to talk about it. So there it is. So, and he's actually contributing in the chat. So first and foremost, but there's Phil's
again, not surprised that he has a much better grasp of the situation and the politics and the reality of it than I do. I just I don't know. Whenever I think about baseball in Latin America and the way that the United States kind of takes advantage of that, it feels very much like kind of the history of the United States of taking advantage of poorer countries and taking what we need and then, not providing any help. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me being weird.
I was fascinated to hear about the youth development program, only because I want to, it's so interesting that the government has such a role. And that's, so, growing up, I mean, that was something the Russians and the Eastern Europeans are all about, basically developing these athletic behemoths for political purposes, for more than anything else. So it's just so interesting that, that's still going on in Cuba, 90 miles off our shore. Although I'm sure China still probably does some of that too, where kids start getting developed real early with government support. But it's almost like a little bit of a bygone era.
Yeah.
It was the joke when we were growing up was what, the East German swimmers or something like that. They
the running joke. Yeah.
They had to shave their mustache before each. They were really doped up on hormones.
And I'm trying to find some of these. I'll have to share it another way, because for whatever reason, my screen capture program just decided to stop working for whatever reason. So I don't know what's going on there. But there's, when I ever see, there's a picture of my father of him walking by, or there's him cutting sugar cane with a cigarette in his mouth, looking like a Street Fighter 2 character. There's a picture of him in front of a tank that I have, and I'm, like I said, as soon as I get an opportunity to capture that. So, the Russian influence. Yeah, Phil's talking about that on YouTube. Absolutely. There's when I went to the island in '99, we're in this Russian car, one of these little K-looking cars.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny. It was so funny because it was maybe 50 horsepower, and you could smell gas the entire time. It's like putting along when we get out of the airport, and
like a golf cart.
Yeah, and my dad paid this guy to drive us around the island, and I remember, like, the airport's really nice. And you go out, and then you're in this middle of this road. It's like just a dirt road, really nicely done dirt road. And then in the middle of this, I think, because we came in like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Yes, it was. This was like, I'm not gonna dare try Muscovy. Yeah, it was like a maroon car. It was a piece of crap. But that was what they had. And anyway, I feel bad saying that, but it was true. Anyway, so we're driving back in the evening, and along the highway, you can see this like little like a outdoor bar, and it's just the lights. That was it, and it was cool because you're not every time you go off the highway in the airport, it's like you get bombarded, but it was just kind of like going off there, and yeah, so yeah, he's that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Phil's point in there, interesting. There's a strong Russian influence on the island, even down to the names. We mentioned it a little bit when we talked to Kevin Goldstein a while back about all the ancient Greek names being used. And he said also, and then I asked him a question that he answered on his podcast, and he was like, "Yeah, look at Yuli Guriel. His name is Yulieski. That's not." That's not a Hispanic name. That's like a Russian influenced name. And even like Vladimir Guerrero. I mean, he's not Cuban, but like it's still in the region, it's so that it is kind of interesting. Yeah. Lazaro, Ivan, all those things. Yeah, it's a good point.
Well, that was a popular bank back in the day in Cuba, from my understanding. But yeah, there's my dad right there with the hat, or there's the helmet, his motorcycle helmet, and I'll probably have to look for another picture. And yeah, here's working for the motorcycle shop he was at for a little while. Some sort of damage there, some story behind that.
That's what year was your dad born? Like 30 something?
1934.
So yeah, I mean, he basically was an adult when everything changed.
Yeah, and that's
he had
already
lived a life. Hey, look at that.
Oh yeah,
the guy in the middle. I know who that is.
No, yeah, this is the picture I was talking about. Him cutting sugarcane. He looks like a badass. I'm sorry, he kind of looks like a badass here. And then this is when he got his citizenship. And yeah, this is kind of like his James Dean pose, I guess I want to say. So yeah, if anybody's watching, for anybody on YouTube, you're watching this now. I'll post, like I said, I'll post some of the stuff in the podcast description. So, but yeah, here's like him right in the middle of this. Looks like just a group of people. Yeah, and then of course he's wearing the typical. The Trailer Park Boys are from his hometown. That's anybody who watches Trailer Park. Trailer Park Boys. I don't know if we have any in the audiences. I do, but anyway, or did. And then yeah, this is him with his brothers and sisters. Not sure when, but this picture's kind of a little blurry. This is his buddies. And I'm not sure where that is in Cuba, but I thought that was a cool picture. And yeah, then with a buddy of his. So, but when we found these pictures, a lot of them he had never shared and kind of was all, so. But yeah. Oh yeah, Walter, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. That's cool. Yeah, when I found these, I was pretty cool. But anyway. So, that being said, let's move on to, speaking of what you were saying earlier, Chris, the disasters or kind of things that are ugly, was the 15 minutes today between the two sides. And that is the reason why the episode is 14:59. We mentioned it earlier. And it's also the Sugar Ray album too, but 15 minutes, 1 minute short of 15 minutes of fame. So, but
well, I don't know if you saw while we were during the interview, Jeff Passan tweeted out something that said that the players and owners plan on meeting every day next week, starting on Monday, and that more and more owners and reps are coming in. And there was something that sounded like somebody pointed out, the players basically said, hey, if we don't get 162 games, you're not getting expanded playoffs this year. And people think that is actually going to move the needle for the owners to a significant degree. We'll see. We do know it, like the drop dead date hasn't happened yet for a full 162. So maybe they just needed pressure like I did in college to get a paper done.
Well, I think they need to ramp up the pressure, both sides, and saying things like that publicly, I think does move the needle. And you got to believe. I mean, the owners are still going to make money if they play 144 games, but that they want the revenue for 162, and they definitely want those expanded playoffs. So I think that's fantastic that they're putting that out there, and they should be talking more. I mean, we've always heard the old stories about, President Truman locking the management and the union into a room and saying, boys, we're not leaving until we have an agreement. We don't have to go that far, but there's no reason we have these sporadic short meetings. They should be talking and getting this done in a perfect world, which we don't have.
Yeah, I mean, they should have been doing this, I don't know, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, a month ago, but yeah, I don't know, nothing like the threat of lost revenue suddenly becoming real to go like, hey, let's just no, wait a minute, let's talk a minute. So hopefully that's good news. I've not been terribly optimistic for most of this process. I've gone through kind of, sinusoidal waves of thinking like, yeah, this is going to get done, and oh no, we're going to miss the whole season. But I don't know. I view more meetings as a good thing. So at least there's that. And I don't know. We got like a little bit of a taste of baseball with the spring camp opening up with all the minor leaguers. So that like gives me a little bit of optimism.
Did you guys see the tweet from Bowden at the Athletic?
Oh man,
the players need to make a good faith effort to get this thing going. I thought that was pretty hilarious.
Oh, man, that was
and for anybody unfamiliar, Jim Bowden, of course, was the former general manager of the Washington Nationals, correct? And was fired, I believe, after it was found that he was skimming bonuses from international players.
Also,
so what were
you don't know anything. You don't know squat, you stupid idiot.
Were we talking about taking advantage of poor players from smaller countries? Yes, Jim Bowden. Also, I don't think he should be talking about anything.
Yeah. Also,
I got a few names I'd like to call him.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny, Rogelio, when I was hanging out with my buddy John the other day,
the Scepter. Yeah,
we were at a country club, as it were. Rest in peace to the Oakland Hills Country Club today.
Oh, yeah. Strange.
And he called his dad, and his dad's like, a big baseball fan, but just kind of surface level. I hate to be like dismissive like that, but like he loves baseball, but just like old school, like watches and people talk about it, doesn't dig into the stats or anything like that. And he was like, he saw me, he's like, hey, you remind me of Chris Russo. I was like, oh no,
no,
oh no.
Oh man, no.
Dead. This is the garbage you give me.
That's Chris Russo.
That to me. Say that to anybody. Say it to somebody.
No,
well, so I don't think he'd ever seen or heard of Chris Russo before, but then he popped up on whatever show Stephen A. Smith is on now, and he saw him and he's like, oh, look at this guy. I like him. He's talking baseball. It's like,
I actually have actual audio of what people were saying after Jim Bowden said after the comment today.
Said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Yes.
I award you no point.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I was like, does he not? I know, again, Twitter is just a small part of the universe. It's not the biggest thing in the world. But when you put that out in like even an article piece, do you sit there and go, look, I mean, I know you're trying to get a job back in baseball. Yeah. Yeah. A simple no would have been fine, but it's just like, look, just how do you not know your audience, Yooper? I mean, I honestly, like you people are reading this and going, okay, we get it. You used to be part of the elite club of people, what have you. But
I think the only way his comments could have made any sense were if he would have said, because the owners are making these microscopic concessions on a few things that almost can't even be taken seriously, the players need to step up and publicly try to move the ball forward with real substantive considerations that could get the owners on board. If he would have, phrased it that way, he might have had at least some slight bit of credibility. But, when the owners are putting together this arbitration pool for $10 or $15 million, which is a pittance, and the players want 115, and there's this massive gap. you can't take the owners too seriously yet. In my opinion.
Yeah, I that's the same thing. Like, it's just to me, if you're going to say some things of factual nature, or at least pretend to be objective.
Yeah.
And that's where I understand. Chris, I mean, was there anything else you want to say about Biden before we move on? Biden. Wow. Bowden.
No, my laptop just crashed on me, so I'm now here on my phone.
Okay.
But no, I just, I don't think it's just my Twitter that has veered this way, but I think Twitter gets pretty hard left at times, and so there's a lot of like labor support, and you're not going to win a lot of fans with arguments about like the players need to relent here, and the owners, let's support these owners, guys. It's not like, I know there was a great tweet sometimes. It was like, welcome to Twitter. Here's your copy of the Communist Manifesto, and I don't know. I'd have to get to find the tweet right, but yeah, you're not going to find a lot of people supporting you. When you're.
You can start calling him "Let's Go Bowden."
Yeah,
Let's go Bowden.
Whatever his name is, just I'm glad to say it incorrectly.
I'm just, what? I'm glad this. I'm pretty proud of the fact that on our podcast we avoid the politics stuff, because there's no. I don't know. There's a lot more entertaining things out there. But one more picture, by the way, I want to show you guys. This is my grandmother, who I never got a chance to meet. This is her, and she's at this point in her life, like in her 60s. Look at her being a badass, benching that. Look at that.
Wow.
Grandma Castillo was
Awesome.
a badass. Look at that. And again, this is also in Cuba. I think this is I think near the place I stayed at, but that is my grandma pumping some iron.
Can you bench that much?
No. Yeah, of course. I could say that maybe 10 years ago, but yeah, like Phil the YouTube chat, while I was getting those gains. But yeah,
that's more of a deadlift, isn't it?
For me?
More of a deadlift than a bench, right?
Yeah, deadlift. But either way, I wanted to share that real quick, so anybody who's watching on YouTube will get that. Again, I forget that on the audio form we have to say watch it on YouTube, because there's this podcast called Who Are These Podcasts? And ever since I started listening to it, I go, man, do we do some of these podcast tropes? And I have to kind of watch myself with it, because I think we run a pretty professionally ran podcast. I don't want to keep it that way. I don't want to go to amateur hour stuff and take my phone, for example, and show you a picture on the screen, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, anything else in terms of mini camp, by the way, Jackson Jobe, what were your thoughts on him? We were talking about this a little earlier. He looked a little bigger than I anticipated. He had big wide shoulders, and Jake, I like his comp. Jake, to compare him to Roy Oswald.
Yeah, I recall Oswald as being about 6 feet tall, or maybe not even. I'm not entirely.
I think it was like 5'11" or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was still not a ton of looks at Jobe just yet. Though the one thing I have heard is that the Tigers are very, very high on him. Even like we knew that already, but yeah, apparently what they've seen so far makes them even happier about him. So. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what we would expect to hear after the first couple of days of camp, but yeah, like he looked good out there in the limited bullpen sessions we saw. He threw, Evan Petzold had a couple videos of he had one from behind the mound and one from behind the catcher view, and you really got a chance to see that slider, which was seems to be as advertised. So.
That was pretty cool. As someone who dabbles as an amateur umpire, it would be really fun to be behind the plate and see that slider come in. That'd be pretty amazing. But I was really, and again, I'm no pitching coach, and I don't pretend to be. But the video from behind the mound, and I know it's just a bullpen session, so he may not have been full go, but I was struck by the nice balance that he finished in. He really looked under control. After release, I gotta believe, anybody can get hurt, but that's got to be good. At least some kind of a good sign moving forward.
Yeah. So wait.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I agree. I mean, that was one of the. I had just written up his prospect profile, that we've been doing over at Motor City Bengals, and it was basically exactly like what we wrote after he was drafted. Everything about him is exactly what you want in a pitching prospect for the most part. Other than perhaps maybe him being like 6'5", 225 or whatever, but that's not necessarily the thing people want anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the stuff is there. The delivery seems pretty low maintenance, and like look at that. It's just kind of, he looked like he's just playing catch, and he probably wasn't going, full bore there, but it's still, I mean, that just about everything you want is there. I don't. The only real concern is he's a pitcher, and they all break. So it's just a matter of how long it's going to be before he breaks.
Oh, there's that slider. Woo!
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. If you're catching that, like a couple times when I watched that, I'm like, it almost looked like a two-seamer. Like it started going to the arm side and then came back. Like, I know it's not true, but there was a little bit of wiffle ball action there, and yeah, obviously, a pitch like that is going to work, particularly if he can locate it and work it in with the other pitches. It's one thing to have like crazy spin and a good breaking ball, but it takes more than that to be a pitcher. And they really seem to think that he's got all the ingredients to do that. So I don't know. Go ahead.
I just say, you see that fastball. I know when you're behind the plate, and if you can't, if a pitcher is hiding that ball, that thing gets on you so fast because you really don't pick it up until maybe it's a third of the way to the plate. And obviously that view there is not perfect, but man, it really looked like that fastball had some jump to me where I was not seeing it right out of his hand very well. It's hard to tell with that camera angle, but then that last half the pitch just looked like it'd be just on you quick. It'd be pretty impressive.
Yeah, and all the scouting reports talk about how his changeup is really good too, and we saw a couple of them when he was the Perfect Game National, or not Perfect Game Classic, I think it's called. The big All-Star game 2 summers ago now, I guess. He threw all 4 of his pitches in that. He's got a slower curveball, and the sliders in the low 80s, the fastballs in the mid 90s. It's just, it's exciting. He's the guy I want to see the most this year, just because we haven't really seen him in game action. So got to figure out a way to get down to Lakeland, or who knows, maybe they love him so much he goes straight to West Michigan. Let's not get crazy, but they did it with Porcello, they did it with Turner.
Like I said, go to our Patreon, Tigers Minor League Report, if you want to help us get to Lakeland. So every bit helps, and we are going to, once Chris gets his schedule cleared with, I was talking about this last night, we have a place to stay. Kian from Tiger Minor League Tracker said we can go stay with him. So we have a place to stay. We just need to get down there. So Chris, we got to talk to the respective ladies in our lives, and Yooper, if you want to come down too. I mean, well, I don't want to impose and say, oh yeah, I'm sure.
It'd be a great time.
Yeah, but I want to see him pitch, and yeah, we're gonna, and Phil's right. He said that in the YouTube chat. You have to be patient with him. He's 19, but look at this. I mean, just like I wanted to see him, doing his reports and looking at that. I was like, well, I can't really say, but now this gives me a better picture of what he's capable of. And it actually, to me, it gives me a little calm and a little bit of a reassurance that the Tigers did a good thing. Not that I wasn't doubting in the first place, but again, the expectations of having a 19-year-old pitcher drafted that high. And you saw that when Meyer could have been a potential signing too, but again, we don't know the back story behind it. So I wish fans would stop doing that. But now with this, it's like, okay, you know what? A slider is, for being 19 years old, holy cow.
Yeah.
I could say other adjectives that are very, a little more, but yeah, and then what was interesting was Bo Brisky so they showed some Bo Brisky footage. He had a number 4, which you don't hardly see. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but yeah, so he was rocking the number 4. He was the Tiger Minor League Pitcher of the Year, 2021 Minor League Pitcher of the Year. And all right, if we had the award, I think Chris would be fair to say he would have been our Pitcher of the Year, right? Just based off his performance.
Did we?
I know we never really did a formal thing.
I thought we did, and gave it to him. But if not, yeah, no, absolutely. There were some pitchers who had good years last year, but he was definitely the one who took the biggest step forward and turned himself into a prospect and had the best numbers, really.
Yeah, there aren't too many single-digit pitchers.
Yeah, there's Brisky there on number 4. If you're watching us on YouTube, and yeah, it's cool to see.
Maybe he's a
So
Brett Favre guy.
yeah, or no, or he's trying to erase the memories of Bobby Higginson to some people. I don't know. Or
Yeah.
Cameron Maben. I think Cameron Maben was number 4 too at one point, wasn't he?
Maybe he's asserting his belief that he could be a number 4 starter.
No, but Evan
We take
Pitzold, Evan Pitzold is doing a really good job down there getting video, and I apologize if I butchered his name incorrectly, but that is what's going on in minicamp, and that's really about it. As far as that goes, is there anything else I'm missing, Chris?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we projected, we tried to project all the rosters. We talked about, I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show, but looking at Jackson Job's, like, the injury stuff when I started looking into his dad.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned that on the podcast or not.
I don't think so.
But
No, I think you mentioned yes. Did you mention it yesterday, right? On the
I
minor league report?
I may have, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. At the risk of repeating myself, basically, I just was like, one of the many things we like about Job is there's some athletic bloodlines there. His dad is a professional golfer, one of the best professional golfers to never win on the PGA Tour, it seems like, and he made millions of dollars, and he won on like the senior tour and won overseas. But he also, something I didn't realize, was injured like a dozen times, which was something I was like, well, wait, I'm slightly worried about that. Although like his most troubling injury had nothing to do with like the sport. He was sweeping in his garage and somehow managed to chop off the tips of 2 of his fingers. Yeah.
Okay.
But he also had, I think, left rotator cuff surgery when he was young. He had he broke the hamate bone in his left hand twice, and he also completely like tore all the ligaments and cartilage in his left wrist, which is like I said, these sorts of things are like, that's kind of concerning. But at the same time, golf is a completely different animal than baseball, and despite all those injuries, he managed to keep coming back. And at one point, he had to completely remake his swing and still managed to come back from that and win, which to me is a different level of athleticism that kind of speaks to like just the ability to adjust and be able to retrain your muscle memory is a huge thing for athletes. And I don't know, again, just kind of applying all this stuff to Job seems unfair, but it's what we can do right now because that's all we have.
So one of the things that was new, and Chris Mikowski of the Detroit News pointed out, and then Evan took some video of this, is a new blue wall. And they're like, well, what's this wall for? Well, found out today it's for throwing weighted balls against it. It's never been a thing down there. I don't remember. In the 3 days down in Lakeland last year, I don't remember seeing this. So have you guys ever seen this before?
No,
I haven't. No.
Not in Lakeland. It wouldn't shock me if they've been doing weighted ball training, but been throwing it at somebody else's wall. Not somebody else's wall, but like somewhere else in the facility, and everybody like, come on, guys, there's pipes back there.
Yeah.
So
I've seen kids throwing a weighted ball against a chain link fence, and it's annoying as hell.
Yeah. So this is and it's you can see the point of this. Really, I mean, they're doing it standstill. It's just trying to strengthen your shoulders, basically, and it's something that was. I don't know. It kind of feels like one of the. Oh, nice. I was at a birthday party this past weekend for one of my son's friends at a place out here called the Arcade, and it's basically an arcade that has mostly old old classic video game machines and pinball.
And you're talking about this. And you're talking about this now. What kind of friend are you, Chris?
I mean, I don't know. It's one of those you pay $20 to get in, and then you could play however long you want, whatever you want.
Again, you're just telling me this now.
And on Sundays it's $15. But so I was playing a bunch of Arkanoid, which is of course a breakout a brick breaking game. But yeah, anyway, so that's funny. Yeah, it does look like they're trying to break those bricks down. But
yeah, you show me pictures of the trampoline place, but you don't bother showing me the arcade. I see how it is. I see. Okay.
I've only been there a handful of times. It's I think the newest game there is from like 2007.
And that's okay, quite frankly, because there's not if you're gonna there's a lot of cool arcades. There's Checkers Bar in Detroit. There's Ready Player One down there, and there's like this. There's another arcade where I was. There's a few of them. There's a 2-floor story one in Chicago, and they were talking about going there versus we did miniature putt for the work event, and video games died at ET. Phil says in the chat. Oh well, they buried them. I mean, you literally buried them. But
that documentary was interesting. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I did see that. That was really well done. And next time I go to Chicago, I'll definitely do that. But in terms of check out the arcade. But at any rate, so we'll keep you updated next week if there's anything. There's going to be a Lakeland drop. The rotation drop will drop tomorrow. I just got in. My knuckles are finally not. That was some interesting driving, but I'll tell you what. Until I got to Kalamazoo, everything was cool, and then from Kalamazoo on, it just got worse and worse. And then by the time I got to Jackson, it was complete whiteout. And so, yeah, that was in funny. Yesterday in Chicago, it was 50 degrees.
It was 50 here as well. It
yeah,
was,
it's great. Yeah,
it was 50 and rainy, and then it was like it was like the day after tomorrow or something like that. The temperature was dropping like a degree every minute, it seemed like, and I could watch as the water on my deck froze, and then the snow started falling, and there were like 4 accidents. I live 3 miles from Harrison School. There were like 4 accidents on the way there. So I was like, oh man, I hope Raj, takes it easy on the freeway. And you never know in situations like that. This is where you see those like 600 car pileups. It's like, oh man. So I'm glad you made it home safely.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. And out of I was funny, not funny, but it was kind of interesting. Was there's only 3 cars that veered off into a ditch or some sort. So that was really there was a couple cars too that was just like 80 or 90 going there, and I'm just I don't know why. Anyway, I don't sound like an old person, but
hey Raj, can you do me a favor? Can you pull up a picture for me?
Picture what?
Can you look up Rockhopper Penguin?
Rockhopper Penguin?
Penguin, yeah. Rockhopper Penguin, yeah.
Okay.
Can you go ahead, put it on the screen there?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's see.
Let me hold on. Let me pull that up there. Alrighty. Let's see here.
Sorry, I know this is great audio.
Audio for one right now at the moment, but okay. So watch on YouTube. Okay?
Cannot wait.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. All right. How does this compare? I asked.
Let's see.
That one down. A couple of them. Yeah. My hair. I had to.
You know the eyebrow. You don't have the eyebrow line.
I like it.
It's it's a real Rockhopper haircut these days. I don't know what happened. Like it looks like I had hair plugs or something like that. I was lying down with Harrison.
By the way, I before we get out of here, first and foremost, there was something I saw today on social media. Somebody who's a regular listener said something about our podcast being pretty high quality and keep it engaged. And they mentioned something. They mentioned another thing in town, and they're like, well, that other thing is like hot takes and stuff like that. And I was rather flattered by the compliment about our podcast, and so just a little cool thing I saw, and it was funny, and it's more of an eternal joke between all of us, but nevertheless, it was good to see. So I'm glad that people are still tuning in throughout the pandemic.
Nice. And I missed that. You're not going to get comparisons to Rockhoppers at every.
No Rockhoppers, no.
We'll talk Rockhopper. We'll talk rock opera.
We'll talk Rock Lobster. B-52.
Rock Lobster. Yeah,
great song.
Tommy the Rock Opera.
Yeah. There's I could definitely talk about that at some point, but that's a different podcast for a different day. We are also putting the link. Emily Walden's Pitch Ninja shirts, the Fight Cancer edition, are back and being printed. Yooper, you got one. Terry,
everybody get one.
What you did get one?
No, I did. Everybody needs to go get one.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, I was gonna say I thought I saw you had one.
Yeah,
and then Chris has got one on the way, right? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So
I was muted for a second.
Yeah. So and then of course, yeah, those we'll put the link in there. We got a lot of link stuff to put in the podcast description tonight. So, but hopefully we'll have some good news next week. That hopefully there will be baseball. If they're going to be starting meeting Monday and get this going, then I'm assuming we can only assume, or irresponsible speculation, they want to get this done quick, because I don't think baseball can take another black eye. I think fans, like I had a fan DM me earlier on Twitter, was like, "What the hell's going on?" and he was asking me about my opinions with the season. Like, there's too much momentum here. They built some momentum last year, even with all the strange things about the spike balls and all that stuff, and so baseball can't do it. So, but new episode tomorrow will be dropping, and the Tiger Runner Report podcast that we recorded on Wednesday will be also dropping as well. So plenty of stuff coming over at MotorCityBengals.com. Check out all the great content. Chris did an article today about the videos that were going out there, and Spencer Rogelson at number 2 on our prospects list, which leads us to number 1. And if you do the math, you know who that is. So that'll be dropping too as well. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting the content cranked out again and getting some relevant baseball. And also, I just want to give a shout out to Jeff Ponus, who I'm now producing his baseball podcast, the 90th percentile. So you can find it at Baseball America. And I want to thank Jeff for giving the opportunity to do that. And so just doing the editing, adding some music stuff, and just making sure it sounds good. So that's another podcast you should add to your rotation.
Nice.
Not because I'm personally involved in it, but Jeff does a really good job. He's interviewing some really big names like Tom House, and he interviewed a pitching coach in the Seattle Mariners system who had a really fascinating story on how he got into that, and that's worth it. So if you want to hear some good stories, check out the 90th percentile over at Baseball America. Is there anything else you guys want to throw out there before we get out of here?
One more thing I want to mention. If you're listening to this on Thursday, college baseball starts tomorrow.
Yes.
If you're listening to it on Friday, college baseball is starting. And you've got some pretty interesting matchups. There's the State Farm Showdown. Michigan is taking on number 14 Texas Tech, which is always going to be fun. And then you've got, who else is playing in that tournament? Arizona and Kansas State. So, yeah, they're if you're hungry for baseball, there are games to watch. The biggest one is probably going to be Oklahoma State at Vanderbilt. A lot of potential draft picks in that.
Oh, that's a big one.
And I'll give you a sneak preview. So I'm also writing, because college baseball is starting. I've got a 2022 MLB draft piece starting tomorrow, and the Tigers picked 12th in the draft this year, and they've picked 12th once before in team history. It was 1978. They picked 12th overall. You guys guess who that is?
Don't tell me. Or Yooper, you gotta take a guess first.
Oh boy!
Is it a outfielder?
It is an outfielder.
Is it Steve Kemp?
No.
No. That would be Kemp.
He'd been playing by 78.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No, yeah, you're right. I'm trying to think.
Pat Sheridan?
No. He got drafted by the Royals. Remember?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so 78. Did he play on the 84 team?
He did.
Oh, Kirk Gibson.
Kirk Gibson, their 12th overall pick. Yeah. And of course, famously a dual sport star. And there is another dual sport left-handed hitting outfielder in the draft this year who might be available at 12.
Gibson is the all-time reception leader in Michigan State, I believe.
Is it all-time reception still? I thought he let in I thought it was like yards per catch.
Or maybe it is yards per catch.
But maybe it's because I would think someone like Charles Rogers or Plexico Burress would have passed him, but I don't. Who knows? Anyway.
Yeah. Fun, bloop.
So anyway, that's a preview. I think. Yeah.
I like draft. It. So, thanks for joining us, Phil. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. It was really, really insightful conversation about Cuban baseball, and we'll be plugging his website in our description. His album of choice, by the way, was Huey Lewis and the News' 1984 classic Sports.
Oh.
And that's been that's gonna take me a couple days to do.
Is that the one that the American Psycho talks about?
Yep.
Outstanding.
I was gonna say,
my first concert, Huey Lewis and the News.
Really?
Marquette, Michigan, 1984.
They played in Marquette? Really?
Yeah, he played up in northern Michigan. Yeah. I was there. It was awesome.
Man, it's such a. I mean, I'm not saying that nothing happens in northern Michigan, but I didn't expect that. So
yeah, Lakeview Arena.
Is that still around, by the way? Lakeview Arena.
I think they're still playing at the Lakeview Arena.
So,
yeah.
All right. So
hockey in the Superior Dome.
Oh, the Superior Dome. That's such a cool place to watch a game. It was one of my favorite experiences going up there. So on that note, we'll leave you with this.
You like Huey Lewis and the News?
They're okay.
Their early work was a little too new wave for my taste. But when Sports came out in '83, they really came into their own, commercially and artistically.
Love.
The whole album has a clear, crisp sound and a new sheen of consummate professionalism that really gives the songs a big boost.
Oh man, it's one of the best.
He's been compared to Elvis Costello, but I think Huey has a far more bitter, cynical sense of humor.
Hey, Albert,
Yes, Alan?
why are there copies of the style section all over the place? Do you have a dog? A little chow or something?
No, Alan.
Is that a raincoat?
Yes, it is. In '87, Huey released this, 4, their most accomplished album. I think their undisputed masterpiece is Hip to Be Square. A song so catchy, most people probably don't listen to the lyrics, but they should, because it's not just about the pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends, it's also a personal statement about the band itself.
By the way, there's a parody of him, Weird Al, acting because Weird Al did a version of that song, and Huey Lewis is playing the Christian Bale character, or Patrick Bateman. So, anyways, on that note, we'll see you next week.